So our agenda for today is to really just learn a little bit about the subject of change management and to share in a discussion and have some knowledge sharing around that subject. So we're going to start with our introductions. I'll give a brief presentation on change management as it relates to DEI change. We'll have a Q&A time, a networking, sharing time when you can share amongst this group what insights you've been having or new information that you've been experiencing lately. And then we'll close at 12:55 and adjourn at 1 o'clock so that we can honor your time. So to get us started, if you would just jump in, we'll unmute mics for anybody who wants to speak, and then share your name, any pronouns that you use, your organization, and what your DEI role is. So I'm at on my screen. We have Dan is at the at the top of my screen, so I'm going to say, Dan, if you could get us started.
I'm with the SCORE organization. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I've been a certified mentor for some 11 years, and I've had more than one administrative role in SCORE. At this point, I am considered the champion for DEI for this local West Michigan chapter. I also participate in a national organization for similar people throughout the country. There's some 270 chapters throughout the country, and I work with that group. And what matters to me most is real communication that takes place within our community. And I think there's a lot of barriers to communication, and one of those has to do with bias. And so I'm very focused on bias and the things that keep us from hearing each other. And that can take place based on several things, but that's where my primary concern is. Thank you.
Nate, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nate Phillips, and I work at the Center for Social Research at Calvin University. I've been in this role for about 3 months at this point, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of focusing on business development work, but mainly working with the ESO groups in town to be able to bring some strong data analytics to those organizations so we can kind of prop them up and get them going. And our CSR team has, I call it a mantra, but I mean, it is the mission statement. I'll just read it for us here. And what we do is we seek to exemplify technical and methodological excellence. So we strive to be a welcoming, inclusive, diverse, anti-racist, and affirming organization. And that's important to note because our team is actually we work under the Calvin University umbrella, but as of April 30th, our Center for Social Research will be breaking away from Calvin. So we will be our own legal entity here very soon. And so we love to, welcome that opportunity because there will be a lot of growth for us to do that. And then we can really key in on what our mission statement is and what our value is when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's why I'm on the call today, to glean some information from all of you subject matter experts, and just to let you know that we have the opportunity to be a strong research partner for many of you in the West Michigan area. So glad to be here today.
Raven.
Hey everyone, my name is Raven Farnham. I work at Network 180 as the HR manager. Pronouns are she, her. What matters most to me, as far as inclusion goes, is employees being able to bring their whole selves to work. You know, we focus on trying to recruit diverse candidates, but we need to really think about how to retain those same employees once they get in. And also, even our current employees on how teaching them how to use the diversity, because yep, it's more than just getting people in, right? It's also, okay, now that you have these diverse employees, like, know how to utilize them, you know, don't ostracize them or don't minimize their voice. Definitely lean in to also hear what they have to say. So that's what matters to me.
Thank you. Catherine?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi. So I apologize. I had to drop or go on a call, but my pronoun, she, her, hers. I am a guest from the Howell Chamber DEI group, and Andre was kind enough to invite some of us from the group to attend today and report back. And we all are just in awe of the Grand Rapids Chamber and all that they're doing in this space, and anxious to learn more about the inclusion conversation. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Daniel, would you like to go up next? Daniel Gonzalez.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to organize things over here and get my screen situated still.
It's okay.
We've just been with the chamber for a few years and have been loving what they've been doing with diversity and inclusion. We've been part of the Minority Contractors Association since we started, and we just like the way that things are going. I've talked really closely with the Kennewa School District. That's where my kids go, and have been talking to them about everything that they've been going on. So I'm just always willing and trying to learn more about what's happening so I can keep up with what's going on.
Thanks, Daniel. Glad to hear you. Ingrid,
Hello?
can you hear?
Oh, hi. There we go.
Yes, there you go.
Good afternoon. I'm Ingrid Miller. I'm the Executive Director for Uptown Grand Rapids, Inc. We're about 14 months into our own DE&I would say, overhaul, with hiring a consultant to guide us through not only how we operate organizationally, but how we can help our 9 constituent nonprofits that we represent get more board representation. And I think that's when we talk about what matters most to me on this conversation today, would be how do we make sure that our nonprofit boards are just as welcoming and can get that broad representation and are inclusive, because a lot of decisions are made at that level and what we do and where our organization's going. And we can't, pick or elect the way our boards are working. So how do we encourage people to participate and make Uptown Grand Rapids, our board and all of our nonprofit boards under us, representative of the community that we serve?
Awesome. Thank you. Megan.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Megan Wacker. I work with HC Hospitality, and I'm a regional director of HR. Steve. So thanks for the welcome, Emily. Steve is on the call as well, and we are working together to really embark on our journey with DEI with our organization. Certainly, we've gone through the exercise of partnering with the chamber and having an opportunity to assess sort of where we are as an organization and where we hope to go. So we are in the beginning stages of that, but are so grateful for the mentorship from them and the guidance, and certainly using our community resources. So that's definitely a big part of getting together with all of you today, and so appreciative to be here. And I think what matters the most in the inclusion conversation is just, I think for us, it's the intentionality of it. It's the education behind it that we want to make sure that we're doing enough to, share the historical references, the impact on what we do for all of our employees to feel their best selves while they're at work. So we've got a journey ahead as it is ongoing for everyone, but just really excited to be part of the conversation.
And Steve.
Megan, nice job. I've had the pleasure of working for AHC Hospitality for the last 36 years, growing up the youngest of 8 in a family. When you use the word inclusion, what does that mean to me? It means that everybody's accepted and loved and respected when you put it into maybe a family context. And so many analogies can be made, of course, in the workplace. So, just kind of backing it up, I've truly felt that diversity has always played a role in our success here within the organization. So, I'm really proud to get the full backing of senior leadership to embark on this journey, as Megan says. But really, I think to, just be able to just look in the mirror and go, okay, very proud of what we've done and who we are. And so really appreciate the Chamber's assistance here. Really appreciate the opportunity to share some information and best practices, and we'll take all the help we can get.
Well, thank you all. Did I miss anyone? My name's Andre Daly. I forget, I omitted saying that at the beginning. My pronouns are he, his, and him. And our as I said before, my colleague Emily Smith is also on this call. Emily, if you want to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Sure, I will. I don't know if Amy Bjrk is introduced.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Smith. Thank you so much for being here today. We're thrilled to have you here for this inaugural Inclusion Solutions. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Inclusion Program Manager with the Chamber. I think I know most of you. For those of you I haven't met yet, welcome. And what matters to me most today is you all being here and being engaged and working and learning and walking alongside each other. So thanks for being here.
And I missed Amy. Amy, go ahead, please.
Oh, that's okay, but I'll go quick. I'm Amy Bjrk. I'm with Service Express. My pronouns are she, her, hers. We are also partnering with the Chamber, so I echo a lot of what you've all said. Just excited to be starting this journey. I've worked for other organizations. Can you not hear me? Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, worked with other organizations that were much further along. And so we are very much at the beginning of our DE&I roadmap journey. How do we get everyone from, aligned from individual contributor all the way up to the executive team. So I'm just excited to connect with you all and share best practices. And I love what Raven said about, we can bring in a diverse pool of candidates and have a really diverse group of people working with us. But if we're not creating an inclusive space for those people, then retention is challenging and belonging doesn't happen. So Raven, that really resonated with me. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So we're going to move on, and our first thing, order of business before I get into the presentation, is just a quick poll that we're going to take of you all, and you can respond in the chat. And the question is, do you see yourself right now and organizationally in terms of your current DEI initiatives? Some of you have referenced that, but we have developed a developmental approach to doing DEI here. And so we're just asking and getting a sense of where people are. Are you developing readiness? Are you building capacity? Or are you creating impact? Where are you in your DEI right now? So if you would take some time to just check that off. Is everyone seeing the poll? All right, great. And we're gonna see the results here. I'm gonna close. And so we're about half and half in terms of developing readiness and building capacity. And that's really helpful to be able to frame the conversation that we're going to have later on throughout this time. We will have an opportunity to delve a little more deeply into that in the next couple of minutes. But I wanted to start with this idea of change. When you think about change and developing readiness for change or building your capacity to change, some of you may have heard this before, but the story that comes to mind that I've heard years and years ago, probably over 20 years ago, was the story about the last buggy whip makers. And before the automobile, before Ford got that first Model T off the assembly line, there were companies that made whips for buggies that were making a lot of money because everybody used a horse and buggy to get around. And those folks were somewhat resistant to the kinds of things that were coming ahead of them when the automobile showed up. And they thought, oh, there's not going to be any real impact. Nobody's going to get into that crazy vehicle after all. And so they didn't really pay attention to the change that was happening right around them. And then something interesting happened. Their sales plummeted, and they started to realize that these automobiles were going to be a thing of the future, and that change was really upon them. And to try to address that, they started to put out these big sales, and they reduced the price of their whips. But in the end, what happened? They went out of business. They all went out of business. A contemporary story of change might be the folks at Blockbuster. And the bottom line on this is when we ignore change as a factor in our success in the world today, we run the risk of extinction, just like the buggy whip makers. And all the research that's out there is telling us that diversity fatigue is a real thing, and that more trainings by themselves don't actually create change. So what is the lesson to be learned from that? Change is the new normal, and actually change is the old normal as well. Change is that one word that is always out there. It's one constant. But we live in a world now where change is happening at an accelerated pace. And so there's a greater impact if we ignore the change like those buggy whip makers did. If we want to see change, and we need to use change management principles, that's my view, to increase the potential that the change outcomes we want will actually happen. And another way to think about it is that each of us needs to write a change story for our organizations. What is it, the change story that we want to happen? So let's look at the change story of the caterpillar. Why the caterpillar? Well, because I think caterpillars can teach us some real lessons because they literally are born to change. And that's something that's not really built into human beings. But when a caterpillar exists in the caterpillar form, it can literally eat up to 300 times its own weight in a day. But while it's doing all that eating, there's nothing really happening otherwise. It's just on a leaf, on a branch somewhere, just eating. That's like us going to training after training after training and consuming all the material, but nothing ever changed. How many of you have gone through that experience where you've been into all those training events, but there isn't really any change that's happening? And that can make us numb. And that's what I think is happening with the whole diversity fatigue scenario, where folks are really tuning out now because they've done all these trainings and they're not really feeling like there's anything that they want to do. But caterpillars are different because within a caterpillar, within their DNA is this movement to change. They have what I consider to be a built-in natural change management. After they've eaten all this stuff, they go into this chrysalis form. And within this chrysalis form, there is something that I found was really incredible to think about. Scientists call these imaginal cells. And these imaginal cells is what starts the process of a caterpillar moving from being a caterpillar into being a butterfly, which is what they're destined to be. They actually create a completely different form, a completely different shape from the caterpillar. It's this organic goop that happens in the caterpillar while it's in that chrysalis that creates this transformation. And in my mind, that organic goop is the change management that we need to happen. Caterpillars are butterflies are very different creatures from the caterpillar that goes into the chrysalis. And if the caterpillar either is going to transform or they're going to die. When they come out of the cocoon, they have a completely different behavioral set. And instead of creeping or crawling around, they fly. Now imagine if our DEI efforts created that kind of behavioral change. So that's the thing that I think I want to focus on as we move through this time today. Just as imaginal cells catalyze the change in caterpillars, we need to reimagine our DEI and talent efforts with change management to catalyze the change that we want to see. One of the things our VP for Talent and Business Services said that I really like is that change management is the secret sauce to DEI change. So these caterpillars move through this change process of transformation because they have built in change management. But human beings don't. Human beings aren't born with change management built in. And so we have to really take a moment to think about what does that mean for us creating DEI change. So we're going to do another quick poll here, and it's not showing up in our box yet. So let's see if we can get it to launch. All right. So this new poll is, how well do you know the topic of change management? So take a minute and share that. All right, so we have a few more coming in.
Andre, I can't see how I can vote. Am I doing something wrong?
You should, are you in the the chat room, the chat panel, can you open that? And you should
Oh.
see the.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so some of us have some awareness about the topic. A few of us have a lot of awareness, but the majority of folks are saying they don't have much awareness of that. Thank you for responding to those polls. The poll. So as we think about change management, let's define what it is. As I said before, human beings don't have change management built in, but there are three. This is my working definition of change management. It is the process of leading the people side of change to achieve desired outcomes and effectively realize the change within the social infrastructure of the workplace. What does that all mean? There are three important points to take away from this. One is that the focus is on the human side of change. At the end of the day, DEI is about people, and we need to focus on that. Secondly, the focus is on outcomes. When I think about equity, I think outcomes, and successful outcomes on the job or in society are key to effective DEI initiatives, because that's where we see the impact happening. And third, social infrastructure. That's the systems and the organizational structures that we have to work within, and that we need to look at all three of those when we talk about change management. So when you think about change management, there are really two levels of change as it relates to DEI, right? We want to think about change management on an organizational level in our DEI, and then change management as on a people level. There are two things that jump out to me, two quotes that jump out to me around that. One is this quote that has been attributed to a variety of different people, but I really appreciate it. It says, every system is perfectly designed to achieve exactly the results it gets. So if you are getting certain results from your people, before focusing just on the people, think about whether the system has been designed to get the results that you desire. On the other side of the equation, Henry David Thoreau said, things do not change, we change. So in other words, people change. So we need both, in my opinion, in our change management for actual change to happen. So there are a ton of change management theories or models, and I'm not going to go through all of them today. I can certainly send this to you when you'll see this when we send out the slide deck. But I focus on the McKinsey 7S change framework. And the reason I focus on the McKinsey 7S and why I prefer it is because it deals with both of the dimensions of change that I just spoke of. And it has at the center of it the idea of shared values, which is the common ground that drives the change. It's the why of DEI change. So when we think of shared values, your shared values might show up in your mission statement. It could show up in your philosophy. It could show up in your reputation in the community or in the industry space that you're in. It could show up in a lot of ways, but it's key that those are the things that drive your change using the McKinsey model. The other thing that I like about the McKinsey 7S model is after you move out of that shared values space, they have what they call the soft and the hard elements. I like to think of them in terms of those two dimensions, the behavioral change that we want from people and the organizational change that we need to implement. And the three things are in each bucket. So your strategy, your structure, and your systems are in the organizational bucket. Your behavioral skills of your people, your leadership style, and your staff, the people themselves, are in the other bucket. So when we think about structure is your organizational structure and design. It could be think about your org chart. Your strategy is, what is your plan? What's your strategic plan look like? What's your organizational plan for doing what you want? Staff, it's just about the people. And then style is about how does your leadership function and what are the leadership ways of your organization. Skills are about what kind of competencies do your people have. And then finally, systems are the processes, policies, and procedures that you utilize. McKinsey 7S, like I said, is flexible. Because it includes all these things, it can help you to identify existing weaknesses that might impact your ability to do effective DEI change. It's holistic because it looks at the organization as a whole and the alignment of people and processes within the organization and how ready it is for change. And then people and processes are included. And as I said before, both need to happen. So when we talk about behavioral change, what we're looking at, again, is how do we influence people to adopt the change that we want to see? And I lean again on McKinsey's work in that area. And they have a model, it's called the influence model, that I wanted to share with you today. And it fits perfectly into a DEI perspective. You can apply things like cultural intelligence to this model of influence, as well as it fits within that framework of the 7 S's. Within the McKinsey's influence model, there are 4 key factors. One is leadership example, meaning that all change starts from the example of the people at the top. The second is values alignment, knowing the why. That's that shared values piece again. The third is support systems. What systems and structures reinforce the changes that you would like to see? And then the final is tools and resources. In other words, what resources do individuals have in order to be able to make the change? So leadership example is critical, and I know I'm moving very quickly here because I want to give us time to talk and discuss. But let me say this about leadership example. There is no research around DEI change that suggests that without leadership examples and leaders championing your DEI change, it will be successful. In fact, it's the single most important factor in any DEI change. The second thing is understanding the why and the values alignment. If your folks don't understand why you're making this change, and I was on a webinar this morning where a leading CDO from a large company was saying this very thing. If your folks don't understand the why of change, they will not internalize it. Howard J. Ross, who is was the founder of Cook Ross, a large DEI consulting firm, says this in his book, Our Search for Belonging. Transformational change only occurs when we understand why we do the things we do. So we need to make sure that that understanding is there. On the other side of it, do your staff see an alignment between their work and what you do as an organization? And does the organization understand what it is that the staff needs in order to feel like they can do their work effectively and bring their whole selves, as Raven said, to work? So you need to make that values alignment connection. And then support systems are about really what kinds of environment is created for folks to operate in so that they see other people doing the work of DEI change. And then finally, what tools and resources are available? When we talk about equity is about understanding that one size fit all doesn't work, right? So the right tools and the right resources need to happen and be available to lead our diversity and talent change. So there are some people who are going to be at the head of the line, ready to change, and they're going to adapt to the and become a part of the change very quickly, and others are going to be further behind. They're going to be looking at those pioneers that we see on the bell curve and asking, well, what are they doing? And then they'll follow on. And then there are others still who will be watching the folks who are that early majority and then following along, and so on. So what does it mean to write your DEI change story? It means increasing a sense of belonging and increasing inclusiveness. All those changes are, though, a desired state. And when we think about those desired states, we have to then start to think about how is it that we get to that desired state. And I was fortunate to come across a really cool framework for implementing DEI and change in organizations. And it's from Furnace Hendricks from Hendricks Works. And Furnace Hendricks has developed this whole strategy around DEI, implementing strategic DEI change. And there are five key elements to this that he has laid out. Building conscious awareness, assessing your context, deciding what content needs to be provided, having important conversations, and connecting people. So when we think about conscious awareness, is change, and sustainable change requires a focus, it requires presence, and it requires an awareness of what impact and outcome you want to develop. So if only some people in the organization are aware of the why of the change, it's not necessarily going to work as effectively. Context is all about understanding that DEI change cannot be transactional. It has to be transformational, and you have to develop the readiness for that. So assessing your context, some of you have done on this call, I know I've done assessments. Some of you have done assessments with us. So you can assess what your context is and what areas are your key pressure points that you need to address. Then looking at what content is needed to be provided. Notice the training is the third step. So what kind of training and learning and development do you need to create to address the gaps in your organizational inclusion, as well as the gaps in your behavioral inclusion? Then who needs to be in that conversation? Who do you need to have brave conversations with and say, hey, this is where we're going, and we're hoping you're going to get on the bus? Or who are the key leaders who are you going to say, hey, here's how we need you to lead us in moving forward? So the big question when we start to finally think about DEI and writing our DEI story is, our DEI change story is, do we want Caterpillar kind of work where we're changing by just eating more and consuming more trainings, or do we want butterfly change? And so that's the question that I would leave you with, and just invite you to share some questions or comments in the chat. That was a lot of information, I know. Thanks, Amy, for sharing David Rock's scarf and Bridget's change model. Would you like to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there are two change models I love, but you convinced me on McKinsey now, because I think what I love about Bridges is how he talks about kind of the emotional state of people and where people are emotionally as we're transitioning through change. So it's not so much a focus on the process. And I think SCARF is kind of a mix of that, but McKinsey, I'm going to go back and look at that again. I love the idea of using a change model through the DE&I process. And I think what I always get stuck on is how do we get people who are not there yet, especially people who might be the largest influencers, right, at that executive level, to be the leaders in this space. That's always my biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Like, obviously we all know on this call that this is really essential, right? And it can't be a check the box. It can't just be that caterpillar chewing on the leaf. Yeah, how do we convince the people? Help me. How do we convince them?
Does anyone else have any thoughts about that or questions?
Well, I have a question. So when you talk about the readiness of the organization, are you talking about leadership or are you talking about staff?
I think, Raven, it's both and.
Okay.
I think, but bear in mind that all the research, and they've been studying this for over 10 years now, is that if the top leadership isn't out front on this, you are highly unlikely to succeed. I mean, highly unlikely.
I absolutely believe that. And I'm happy to say at my organization that our leadership is out front with this, but I do see hesitation with moving forward due to fear of some staff. So it's like, not wanting to upset people. And, so I don't know how much people know about Network 180, but we are made up of therapists, social workers, counselors. And so and we have people in top leadership that are that as well. And so when people know, like, you have a big heart, know how you kind of orient, like, they kind of take advantage of that because, like, they will use that to also kind of persuade, like, well, this is why we shouldn't, or this is how I feel. And they know that they're going to take into account their feelings. Right. And so it's one of those things, like, what do you do when you don't want to upset anyone?
Right. And the issue there is, how do you engage your staff around the shared values? What's the shared value of that you are asking every staff person at Network 180 to be a part of? And that becomes the driver. That's why I utilize McKinsey, because it's not a process that you're developing separate and apart from something that should already be a part, embedded in the work and the approach of every person on your staff. How does that land for you?
I mean, I definitely understand that, and that is the approach that we've kind of decided to take, is to, just tie it to the business. If nothing else, you can't really argue, especially with what we do, tying DEI to the business. But, it's just trying to get through to leadership that you're not going to please everyone, unfortunately. And again, I would say the majority of our staff will be on board. It's just a small minority that probably will be vocal about it.
Right, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that question and that perspective. Anyone else want to jump in? Oh, there you go. Ingrid, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'll get this mute and unmute thing correct. Well, one thing that I think, just talking about these high level leadership change questions, that made it a little bit more digestible to our group in particular, was the common agreement and the common understanding that to be truly transformational, it wasn't going to happen overnight. And so I think knowing that there was agreed upon course of action, and I don't, for lack of a better term, maybe grace with one another, that we're not going to get it all right all the time, but an agreement that we're going to be working toward this mutually agreed upon transformation that was helpful. And then even to respond kind of to Raven's thing, we agreed that if there were going to be some people that were upset, you were looking at who it was that you were going to upset, right? And like, if the greater push and the greater transformation is going to better the organization and have the most kind of catalytic change, then we could deal with the one or two one-offs, right? And I feel like you don't have to convince, and at least I didn't have this experience in leadership change. It was more addressing the fear that they didn't want to do something wrong, right? So it was, we're learning, right? This is going to be a way of life and a practice, and so it's not going to happen overnight. And we need to like acknowledge that.
Thanks a lot, Ingrid, for sharing that perspective. I think to kind of capture both of your comments, Raven and Ingrid, one of the things that the folks who study change will tell you is that change is not the real issue that people are resisting. What they're resisting is the loss of certainty, loss of perspective, loss of power, loss of role, all kinds of loss are wrapped into change. And so if you can address the loss in the light of your shared values, so what's the preferred future that we're moving towards, and where do you fit in that? Then I think that helps to reduce the anxiety around change. But the reality is you're never going to get 100%. It's about getting the most people as you can. And at the end of the day, because this is so critical and it should be tied to our business strategy, the conversations that need to be had is, look, if we don't make this change, this impacts our business and our ability to do this work well. That's really how I approach DEI change. And we're giving you a pathway to do that. We're not asking you to flip a switch and tomorrow make the change. We're giving you a pathway. Now, if folks then choose to ignore the pathway, not to get on the bus, to push back against your organizational values, then that's a whole nother conversation that you need to think about how you're going to have that conversation. But it's not about an external thing, as I said before. It's about how is this going to benefit your organization and move your business forward. And that's why it's important for you to embed it in your business strategy. I want to keep time for you all to share. So I'm going to ask one more poll question. And then I'm going to ask you all to share about what is one thing that you've learned in the last 3 to 6 months that you would like to share with your group. So here's our last poll of the day. How likely are you to participate in a DEI change management workshop? If we could take a deeper dive into this and give you some more tools and spend some more time, how likely would you be to participate? We're always looking for your input on how to address these issues. So I'm going to close the poll out now. And see, we've got majority of the folks would be interested, and thank you for sharing your responses on that. I appreciate it. And the rest of our time, one thing that you have learned or discovered in the last 3 to 6 months in your role in DEI that you'd like to share with the group. Anyone got a nugget?
I will go. I've been doing some work for our trans employees, And, in my research, I literally just reached directly out to the individuals and had a private conversation and an interview. And they really appreciated me coming to them versus just going to an outside center. They're like, we work here. You're showing that you actually value my voice, my opinion, versus just going outside and then implementing something. So talk to your employees.
That's great. Thank you, Raven. Anyone else?
I know we changed our application and added a question about the pronouns, the preferred pronouns, and that has received a lot of positive feedback.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
And thank you for
Anyone else?
today. I just appreciate the conversation here. I feel like we're all the choir directors and we're hearing the good preach here. But I just admire everybody's leadership here to fight for what's right, and we all believe in this. And change management is not easy for an organization, but it can be done. And so I just appreciate the opportunity to join you today.
Yeah, that's great. And please do share this opportunity with others. We have more coming up, 3 more for the rest of the year, and it will continue to be a free opportunity for us to network and learn from each other. If there are subjects that you think we should be covering, you can share that too in the chat. Anyone else want to close us out on one last thing that you've learned in the last 3 to 6 months? Our next inclusion solution will be on June 21. So mark that on your calendar. And I hope we'll see you all back again. Again, if you have input or ideas that you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to share. We're only going to be able to improve and support you in partnering for greater inclusion if we know what it is that works for you. If you'd like to reach out to myself or Emily, please don't hesitate. If you'd like to learn more about our DEI Design for Change workshop, we'll be sending information about that out as well. It's getting close to that time. If anybody has anything that they'd like to add before we close, I want to thank you all for being with us for our first inclusion solution, and I hope you'll be back again and that we can continue to support and learn from each other as we partner to create great inclusion. Thank you all for coming.
All right. Nice job, Andre. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Emily.